All right, check it really quick. Are we good? Come on, YouTube. There we go. All right, sweet. All righty. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of the United Voluntary Podcast. My name is Magnus. I'm back with my two co-hosts, Kitty and Star. Today, we kind of have a bummer topic to discuss, but kind of an important one, of the current crisis that's going on with homelessness during the pandemic, and particularly this winter storm, and how more often than not the police are making the situation worse and actually going after people that are trying to help for some confusing reason. So we have two special guests today. We have out of Lansing, Michigan, we have Martin, and I'm sorry, I forgot your name already.
Julia.
Martin and Julia from Punks with Lunch. Yeah, how you guys doing?
Doing all right. Doing all right. Staying warm.
Right, yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the same, but I can barely get out my front door, so I've been kind of stuck inside. So you guys kind of had a experience, we'll call it that, for lack of a better term, if you kind of want to go through what happened to you guys very recently.
I guess they could kind of get the background of what Punks with Lunch is and how it's different than like most outreaches.
Okay, yeah, we can go with that.
First. So Punks with Lunch, a little background. The Lansing chapter started here 3 years ago, November of 2017. It's based on the original chapter that is based out of West Oakland, California. They like us distribute food and harm reduction items and winter wear and tents and sleeping bags and necessities. People who are unsheltered, people who are low income, living in subsidized housing, people that just need help with getting by, whatever their demographic is. So we started that about 3 years ago, and here in Michigan, and we get together on the weekends and set up tables and go out to the outlying areas where homeless camps and shelters are, and get out food and supplies and harm reduction items to folks.
I think we really try to develop interpersonal connections with the individuals where they're hopefully is like a support mechanism to help them up. Providing like more of a long-term relationship. As Julia mentioned, harm reduction is something that we do quite different from a lot of the other local outreach groups. And trying to help people address the various different needs that they have as individuals that are hurdles to them becoming housed and getting back on their feet.
That seems to be like how you're saying it was different. It's more bottom up, like individual connections, and less of just like the usual food bank, come as you are. Like you're trying to actually build and be a little more deeper and a little more useful to people than that.
Indeed. Yeah, and we do have our regular outreaches as well, where we're doing just come and get what you need. We're in a food pantry.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer to you at all? Sorry, it's kind of mumbling out when you like lean your head back a little bit.
And we do run like a 24-hour food pantry as well up on like the main strip here in Lansing.
Nice.
So there is a lot of this, just trying to inspire and encourage is in our mission statement, actually. To try to motivate and activate other people as well, to get them out there to be a part of that change.
Yeah, because that's really important to me, and that's kind of what we're all trying to do on this podcast. Is a lot of people. There's tons of organizations, obviously, but there's a lot of people that come to me and they'll ask me like, how do I do this? How do I get involved? How do I set it up in my community? And like a lot of those resources aren't as easily available to people. They don't know how they can go from just a random individual to like the level of what you guys are doing without there already being kind of a structure built up already. And that's really cool that like you guys are actively trying to not only just do it, but spread the idea and the actual action, which is really important.
Absolutely.
Well, as far as like starting it up, I mean, one of my dreams would be to have like a Punks Lunch in every state of the union. And a week or so ago, I was talking with a friend of mine who now lives in Iowa in Des Moines, and he was homeless here in Michigan last year, and that's how I met him was from him coming to distros, and he and I built a connection, and he was living out in various wooded areas, and I would meet up with him once or twice a week, and get him some supplies, get him some bus tokens. If you needed water, if you needed new tarps, if sometimes we would just get together and go out and get a cheeseburger together and hang out and talk, and he eventually, got to where he, reconnected with family who lived in Iowa and with a sister who, said that he could come out there and stay with her. And he's since then, this is back in, I think he moved, I don't know, maybe late last year. And he moved to Iowa and was staying with family for a while, and then is now staying with friends and has a job at a grocery store, like a big kind of warehouse type grocery store there. And he's doing pretty good now. And he was telling me last week about a guy a homeless guy that they found had died, froze to death in an outhouse. And he said it was near the library, not far from where he lived. He said, I don't know this guy. I never met him before in my life, but he was within a few blocks of where I live. And if I knew him, if I had found him, I would have let him come and stay with me. And he told me, he's like, we need something like you guys out here. And I told him, well, can you get something started? And he's like, I got friends that own a pizza shop. They could probably donate pizzas to give out. I've got, I work at a grocery store. They're really giving to the community, and they might be willing to, help and donate food or donate supplies or give me a discount to get supplies. I basically sat down and told him, like, this is what I did. This is what we did to initially get started. This is how we raised the funds initially. This is the connections we made with different community members, with different organizations in the area to get the supplies that we needed. We reached out and made all these connections with people, and it started out small and it's grown a lot. But and I told him, all you gotta do is make a few phone calls and maybe something can happen. And he's working on it now. So hopefully, maybe I'm, fingers crossed, in a few months, maybe there'll be a Punks with Lunch Iowa.
Yeah, and that's like that kind of will tie into what we talk about later with the whole food situation that happened in Washington. But that's a really good way to like go about it. To if you're like good friends with a manager or something at a local restaurant, like just pick a day and talk to him. Be like, hey, at 8 o'clock today when you're shutting down, can I come by and can you just make a bunch of meals and then we'll go out? And that doesn't require any infrastructure, or any money, or anything like that. Like almost every single restaurant has food waste. You'll find a lot of people really welcome to it, and just little actions like that can build up. And especially, unfortunately, as human beings, we're very follower type people, to where there is a ton of people that would want to help, but they aren't engaged right now. But if they see you taking those first steps, like other people will be like, hey, I see what you've been doing. Can I help out? So kind of like making that first leap
That
into
first step
it.
is always the hardest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just talking. I went to the Libertarian Party of Oakland's meeting yesterday, and there's a guy that I met there. He runs an organization they call Lighthouse, which does something kind of similar to you guys, where they individually find families and pretty much like link with that family, and then fund their like essentially be like a food stamp or a WIC program, but specifically for like one family at a time. And I think they have like 7 families right now. And that's just he's just one guy. Like he just kind of threw it together. I think he works as like a middle manager somewhere, so he's not particularly wealthy, but he just like, I'm gonna do this. So it's easier than you think, is kind of like, what I want people to understand, to start this rolling. And little actions help people that are in these really fucking horrible situations more than you realize.
Well, and it's also consistency too. I mean, you guys have been out there every other Saturday for 3 years now. I mean, I think Julia and Martin, you guys maybe taken off once or twice that I remember for a wedding and then something else that you guys weren't there. But I mean, for the past 3 years, they've been consistently out there every other Saturday. So, I mean, sometimes these things you do have to, realize that there's time behind it and you have to make that commitment.
Yeah, and the more consistent you are with it, the more well-known it will be. Like if you just show up one day, then maybe nobody will be there. But if you're known of like, hey, I'm here every single week, I do this every single week, like that's how the knowledge of that kind of starts to spread more easily when it's consistent.
Exactly. We have random people show up all the time. Like,
Yeah.
I want to help out. That's great. Jump on in.
Yeah, it's great.
Absolutely.
And the people that come to us, they know when we're going to be there, and they follow us on the social media pages. And the park where we set up at, I was actually shocked and amazed that the Parks and Rec department did this. There's a couple different organizations that do similar things that set up in this park where we're at. They actually created a little like a wooden sign with enclosed in glass, a place to put signs and stuff. And each of us have a panel where we can put our information and put our schedules as far as when we're going to be there, and any important information, resources that we might want to give, so that people in the community can go and look and like, oh, okay, Punch's Lunch is going to be there next Saturday. And in our panel, we put our resource guide, we put our information, our schedule as far as when we're going to be there. We put information about harm reduction stuff, and how to use naloxone, some different things that the other organizations didn't put out. The other organizations were putting out resources as far as where the different food banks and food pantries were, but we could just mimic them and copycat what they put out. But we wanted to put out a few things that were more specific to our group. So
yeah, there's a lot of like, because I was briefly homeless for a while, so like there's a lot of things you don't realize that are very important, that if the information was out there would be really useful to people. And one of them was when I was living in Chicago. I never even thought of this, but people were going around and putting up flyers on like lampposts and stuff of publicly accessible like outlets to charge your phone, and like having like them all like marked on a lamp. And I'm like, that's brilliant. Like I would have never thought of that. Like that's really smart, because like even if you aren't homeless, even if you're just like in a crisis situation or a million other scenarios, like just to be able to grab a map and be like, hey, 2 blocks this way, there's this outlet on the side of the building you can plug your phone into. Like that's information like that. And obviously there's a million other tiny examples of little smaller things people need, help people need, information that would be good to know to people that might not have a cell phone or a computer or a library card or something like that you can just get out to the community. Is that's definitely stuff that like the more corporate charities and stuff obviously aren't going to do, because they're more just focused on food and wellness, to where like the more local individual people can get out and kind of attack issues like that more effectively.
Well, I think one supply that gets overlooked a lot that I've brought up quite a bit is women's feminine products.
We had that whole conversation about bras, and I never thought about that either, because I'm a guy, and I'm like, well, you're right. Like, that would be awful.
Pads and tampons and,
Well, and then the discussion also comes up on whether or not for cups. Like Julia and I have talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
There's not an accessible way that the women can
sanitize them.
Yeah. I mean,
if you give them to them, it increases the risk of them getting a uterine infection, which as a midwife, I'm well aware that that's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the situation.
So, but that's one product. And then bras also, like, it's just so difficult to get so many different sizes of bras that I haven't found any place that supplies them to hand out to the at-risk community.
And the other thing that like I really wanted to address, I don't know if we're at that point yet. I had a patient needed something, but like the homelessness in different regions is so different. Like, you know, you guys have a different group of at-risk people than we do here. And here there is the normal, probably like you see everywhere, people that are just not thriving in modern culture, or, you know, struggle with addiction or struggle with mental health issues or things like that. You know, that is everywhere. But here we have a growing number of families that are houseless. It is so extremely expensive to live in the Pacific Northwest. And just recently, our housing market just skyrocketed. We're having like bidding wars. Houses are being sold for like 200% of the asking price in 4 days. And you know what I mean? It's just, and so a lot of people that were leasing affordable housing have now decided to kick people out and find some loopholes to evict people and then put it on the market so they could get their money. Because a lot of people here, a lot of investors have houses that they maintain as rentals until the housing market's good. Then they sell them so that they can get their maximum profit, right? And that's what's going on. So we're having all of these families that are ending up on the streets and people that are working sometimes 2 jobs. They don't make enough to qualify for an apartment, or they are unemployed because of COVID, or, you know, there's like 8,000 reasons, but they're ending up houseless and working. So we have a lot of working poor families on the streets, and their needs are specifically different than the at-risk community we're used to supporting. Like, they're trying to functionally raise a family in a tent on the streets in Portland or Seattle or Olympia. And they're concerned for their kids and CPS. They're afraid of CPS getting involved. They're afraid of losing custody of their kids. They're afraid of everything that goes with that. They're afraid of their things being stolen or their family being harmed while they're at work. They're afraid of, like, so there's like whole other security issues. And, you know, trying to deal with that has just been a nightmare. And then we just had the state propose a bill that makes illegal camping a crime. So it's considered illegal camping if it doesn't have to involve a tent, if you have personal items and you are sleeping in any public area that's not designated for camping. So we then have a situation. Now, part of that was in retaliation for the Shaz, which, you know, people were still camping up on Capitol Hill, you know, to this day. But then also it is just the problem. We have had this growing houselessness, like, population in Portland and in Seattle. If you go to Portland now, every underpass has encampments. Every single public area or lot has like, you can't go 2 blocks without seeing clusters of tents in Portland. And Seattle isn't quite to that level. Olympia is less, but Olympia is the only city that's doing something proactive.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't like, you know, like a quarter of the whole point of the Chaz was like homeless, like helping and like outreach.
Actually, yeah, we had huge homeless outreach. So
isn't like the irony of using that as a crutch to criminalize homelessness?
So
like,
while Chaz was in place, all of the houseless from all of Seattle moved to the Chaz. And then we set up groups with Food Not Bombs and all the other different groups that we work with. And we fed them and we got them clothes. And we had these like socks distribution program and had it set up so they had a safe little community and food. And, you know, so like, yeah, we were taking care of them because we were trying as anarchists to show that you can care for everybody and it's okay. We don't have to be like, oh, we don't want to share with them. You know, it's like, no, everybody is welcome, even with issues or not, or, you know, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. We are all souls trapped in meat suits, you know, and we're all in our situation, wherever we're at. And a lot of people are not thriving in the current economy or in the current capitalist system. And it is not a sign of a bad person or a bad character or a failing if you're not thriving right now in today's world. Like, you are not a failed human if you do not thrive at that level. I mean, to even afford a cheap apartment in a rough area here, it's $1,200 a month for a studio apartment, even in the more rural areas. That's
I mean, like this I'm decently out in like the woods at this point in Michigan, and this is my entire apartment. Like, my bed is behind that flag, and this is like $550.
But so $550 you can afford a minimum wage
imagine job. Yeah, but that's the thing is, like, if I had a kid, like, where, you know, So like if this is their idea of cheap housing is a literal box, and I'm way out in like the rural community.
Mhm.
You go into Detroit, like you'll find apartments this big for like $1,200, $400,
Exactly.
like $1,400. Like
But
you could barely get away with having like a full size dog in this apartment, let alone like a family. So
But you
like,
can't even legally qualify for that apartment for a $1,200 apartment unless you make 3 times that amount.
that's something nobody
And
talks about.
they will not legally rent it to you if you have more than the number of occupants that are allowed for that space. So if you deal with a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment, it can only be a single or a couple with no kids. If it involves children, then they're legally required not to rent it to you unless you get a 2-bedroom, which is more like $1,500 to $1,800 a month. And you have to make 3 times that to even qualify for the apartment. So we have people that are working on the streets trying to qualify for low-income apartments that won't. So yeah, we made more low-income apartments available. No one's qualifying for them. So they made more available through Section 8 housing and stuff like that. It has a 5-year waiting list.
Yeah, the Section 8 system has there's so much going on in that people don't talk about, of like how many people get screwed so bad.
Yeah, there's low-income housing. How does someone get low-income housing? Oh, you get on this wait list. It takes 5 years. Meanwhile, you're going to be on the streets for 5 years? Not everyone has family they can go live with. Not everybody has, the support network. So we are just having droves of people end up houseless with no path forward.
Yeah, and like you said of different areas having different issues. Like where I grew up in northern Michigan, there's plenty of shelters and there's plenty of food banks, but the problem is like the nearest Walgreens might be a 30-minute drive away because it's middle of nowhere northern Michigan. So like when I was up there and I was homeless for 4 months, my biggest issue was I couldn't get transportation anywhere. Like I had no problem getting food. I had no problem finding a place to sleep, whatever, in a shelter. But if I needed to go get medication or if I needed to go to like the next town over to apply for food stamps, like there was no way to get there because it's a 20-mile walk and there's no public transit or anything like that. And I think now there is a group up there. I'm not sure. It was a couple of years ago that was specifically like ride sharing for like families and low income people and stuff that didn't have a vehicle. But that goes to your point of like the inner city homeless is very different than like rural homeless. Like being homeless in the desert is very different than being homeless like where it snows 6 inches overnight. And like learning your area and learning like what more might be helpful and what trying to think of like what item like if I threw away something in this house, what item would be like the most unfortunate to lose in my area? Like it might not be a sleeping bag, it might be a bus pass, it might be a rain jacket if you live in the Pacific Northwest, like a lot of things like that.
Yeah. So we had this massive snow that came in. So we had emergency shelters in Seattle open up, and everyone was celebrating that we opened up 500 people space for 500 in these emergency shelters for the storm. But our homeless population is currently estimated at 5,000 for Seattle. So there's 5,000 people that don't have a home in a snow. And now they're making it illegal to camp. So if you're in a public place with personal belongings sleeping, you're committing a crime. And now it's become a policing issue.
Didn't we, I think, Julie and Martin, didn't you guys share that sign from Seattle a couple years ago that was like, if you see a tent, mind your own fucking business?
Yeah.
Yeah, wasn't that from? That's what I thought.
I think so.
Yeah, they had signs that the city had put up, about if you see a tent, call this number and inform us. And it's like, well, fuck you guys.
Like see something, say something, shit. Pretty much.
Yeah, like that.
Narc about
the homeless people, and it's like, So someone recreated the sign of like, if you see a tent, mind your own fucking business.
So did you want me to talk a bit about what happened in Olympia with Olympia Housing now?
Yeah, so you bring that up. I'm also going to bring up what happened in Portland because there's all sorts of just ridiculous.
Yeah. So Olympia Housing now, there's like these groups that are done mostly by, on the left, more anarchist leaning groups, or communist or ANCOMs or whatever. But there's Housing Now projects in almost every major city. So there's Tacoma Housing Now, Olympia Housing Now, Seattle Housing Now. Well, Olympia Housing Now pod has been working a lot with the city and different other groups and things like that. And so they were able to get a whole grassroots fundraising thing going, and they were able to get a bunch of people off the streets, especially the ones with kids, into a hotel that took up a whole wing of the hotel. Well, after a couple days, there was complaints from other people at the hotel. This is the best I understand it from multiple sources, so there might be parts where, oh, that isn't exactly, but no, this is the best I understand it, unpacked from everywhere. This is where we're at. So there were complaints from other guests at the hotel, which, whatever. Anyway, so they decided, because they have the right to refuse service, that even though they were paying their nightly hotel bill, that they were being asked to leave. Well, they refused to leave because they had the money, they were paying it, they had housing. This is ridiculous. So there was this group, Olympia Housing Now, that was there watching vigil and taking care of everybody, kind of standing guard and helping to keep things chill. Needless to say, a SWAT team came.
Heavy too.
Really heavy SWAT team.
Yeah, I can't find the video because a lot of the streams have been taken down. But we're talking more of a response. Probably more there than almost at the beginning of the Capitol riots. That was that's how hard they came in on this group of people.
And they made sure they did it without any warning, so there was no way that we could rally forces and have enough people there for resistance to protect them. They decided that it was, I can't remember how they termed it. They tried to make it sound like people were trespassing, and they were doing an action in the hotel, which I will agree they were. They were refusing to leave because they had paid their hotel bills and they had the money to continue. And so they were cooperating with the request to leave, of course. Why would they? But anyway, so that became an adversarial situation. So they brought in the SWAT team. They even tear gassed a 9-year-old. They came in with flashbangs. They arrested the Olympia Housing Now people that were there, protecting the people. There was no time or ability for
again to your point though. Oh, there was complaints from the other guests. I'm I wonder how disturbed they were when there was flashbangs and rubber bullets,
tear gas
outside their fucking hotel room,
inside the hotel.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So then that kind of, there was a big push for funds to house some of the unhoused population because of COVID and the population being so high in hotels. And it almost seemed like this was partially staged to use this as an argument against it. And then that bill hit, making houselessness basically a crime now, because illegal camping laws, which they just came up with.
Yeah, and they just seem to be doubling down on it, because I have it pulled up on the screen of what happened in Portland, not that far away from Olympia. And so the Fred Meyer, I guess that's just a local chain grocery store or something like that.
It's huge here.
Yeah, so they had their power knocked out because of the storm, and they had to throw away a bunch of perishable foods. And obviously there's the worst laws in America, in my opinion, of that you cannot give away expired food to homeless people because it's some form of liability for lawsuit or whatever. So the people that ran the store pretty much said, hey, we're going to throw this all in a dumpster. You guys can just come get it. It's already a blizzard. It was already semi-frozen food. Just come grab it. Well, Portland PD showed up, started arresting people, and literally put patrol officers to guard a dumpster full of perfectly editable food to prevent the community from taking it, which is the most surreal sentence I've ever said out loud in my life. I cannot understand why this is necessary. Why, why can't the mayor just be all right, whatever, print off flyers. We will not sue if we get food poisoning, and just hand out the food, find a workaround of the law. Obviously you can't change the law in 24 hours because a disaster happened or whatever, but make something happen, because this is ridiculous. You're literally letting perfectly good food go to waste while they're starving and freezing to death, right outside.
I think
I don't know what's going on in Portland with the cops, but it does seem to be an all-out war against the homeless right now. Like,
there's okay, so as liberal as it is in the Pacific Northwest, there's institutions like policing that are very much still patriarchal, right-wing, authoritarian, like anti the people. It really feels, and it's why we have such heavy battles. It's why there's such a force of blue liners here, because there is that mentality that supports that authoritarian model, even though most of the population does not, which is why there's such the backlash, which is why the city of Seattle was pretty much fine with the shads being left alone and maintaining. It was kind of a cool thing. It kind of brought tourism, you know?
right.
It was like, let's see if this works. But then the thing, with that food, it is absurd because that isn't it. Like, food should not be. What kind of world do we live in where capitalism is so protected that we can't even give away food to people who need it? That is perfectly good, like, because they're not paying for it, and that's going to upset the economy, the economic structure.
Yeah, because the whole justice system. Yeah, the whole justice system is just set up to where, like, well, if you buy the food and then you eat it, you're fine. But if you take it for free, then there's liability and lawsuits. Which maybe I'm just very ignorant, but I've never heard of somebody like suing like McDonald's because they ate a hamburger out of a dumpster and got sick. I've never heard that once in my life. So why is there a law around that? Like, is this one of those instances of like one person burned themselves on coffee, so they had to put the like warning coffee hot label?
Yeah.
I just don't understand it. I cannot wrap.
It's really about protecting capitalism. It's not about protecting people's health, because I know plenty of food banks that actually distribute expired post-dates food, and nobody's ever sued.
I think Food Not Bombs does dumpster diving, but
Yeah,
then they have. Yeah, they have
they get arrested sometimes too.
Yeah, they get arrested for it all the time. And I personally knew, because when I lived in Chicago, I worked at like 3 different restaurants, and I've had multiple conversations with the GM of like, I really want to give this food away, but like the health inspector literally makes rounds, because I used to work on the waterfront, and if he saw people doing that, he would ticket them. And it's like, why? Like, like, because the whole way downtown Chicago works is this 2 tiers. So you have like cars on top, and then there's another level under that's like underpass where they have like tunnels and stuff. The homeless live down there. So literally we would have our restaurants, and then right behind us in the tunnels was just a shit ton of homeless people. And we would literally have to like throw this food away, because you would see I think it was like the Chicago Waterfront Commission or something like that, would like walk up and down, like trying to check if people are giving food to homeless people to give them tickets and fines. And it's like, why? Why? Like, you have nothing better to do. And the fact that there's someone whose job is to do that, and their salary alone could probably like feed and house like several of those people, makes it even more surreal.
Well, the other thing we're finding is it's so expensive to be homeless. These families that are trying to live in tents, they have to eat out every meal. They can't store food. They're having to rebuy things all the time because of theft. They're having to pay usually for a storage unit or for the things that they still own. Everything at every turn is so expensive that they're not able to save and get ahead, or, it goes down fast.
Being poor
and
is very expensive.
that can tie into the back 40, which is one of our main encampments. If Julianne Martin wanted to talk about that, because I know, I know Martin's gone out there quite a bit, and just recently we had the Poor People's Campaign go out there, because in December, like every single city in Michigan was doing sweeps of encampments.
And zero mainstream media coverage about it. The fact that they were literally going around and bulldozing homeless encampments during a fucking pandemic, and nobody.
They're doing it everywhere.
The one here got some media attention, and it really did keep the city off their back for quite a while, several months. And that's what it was. It was the media attention they got out there, and the public really did step up. But then again, along with the public awareness, became quite a few problems. An excess of people bringing stuff out that maybe wasn't needed. Clothing was a big thing. People were bringing out worn clothing, and then the homeless, I guess, would just decide, well, I'm getting something new next week. So, and then it became a big issue of just discarded refuse.
Mm-hmm.
And
we had that problem in Seattle too.
Yeah,
Either that or
and that provided the excuse for the city to
Mhm.
ultimately
Mhm.
come in and
Same.
say, okay, done.
Yeah, people
You
were
know.
just bringing out, well, we'll bring you clothes, we'll bring you food, we'll bring you all these things, and they weren't actually trying to find out what's
gonna help?
what's going to help, like what do you need, and they would just end up throwing away so much stuff and creating so much waste, and then that becomes a problem of, well, we have to make you clear out because it's
Illegal dumping.
unsanitary. You
Mhm.
don't, and like, well, if you
It's a health hazard.
if you
Definitely.
if you treat this community, because that's what it is, if you treat this community at this this the camp area, if you treat it like a community, just like everybody else, where every Tuesday we get our garbage picked up, and if you have it's trash day at the back 40, have somebody that's going to come out with a truck, and like, okay, if you have all your stuff set out by Tuesday at 10 a.m., we'll load it up in the back of the truck and we'll take it to the dump. It's going to help them to keep their area, their home, more sanitary, more clean, and try to keep it, so that the city's not going to come down on them and use that as a reason to push them out. They're currently, trying to get them out, partially because of that, and partially because, yes, it is so cold and they want people to go into the shelters, but they were using a lot of the excess trash and stuff there to try to push people out, instead of trying to help them to work together to
Yeah, the city
fix
never
it,
offered to come in and actually take the trash away,
mhm.
but they used it as a reason to just simply
Yeah, yeah. They
Here they won't actually ever help, because the trash is all privatized. Everyone has to pay for trash disposal.
Yeah,
It costs $500 for a dumpster. So because it's all privatized, you see, the city isn't going to pay money to deal with the trash problem. Meanwhile, we had a bunch of people donating to Chaz, and it became just easier than Goodwill, because Goodwill was closed because of COVID. Everyone could just dump all the household goods on the homeless. And so like, people were
Yeah.
dropping off, like, I remember one of the pictures even showed like an ironing board and an iron. It's like, yeah, that's what the homeless need.
Let me plug this in.
We did have a group here that did help to pay. We did pay for a dumpster to do a cleanup. There, we had a couple groups that did help to pay for temporary dumpsters so that they could come and get rid of things they needed. We had a local group that is helping to pay for an outhouse
Mhm.
for them to have there, and help pay for the upkeep of that.
Yeah, portable toilets on Amazon, the little package ones. I think they're like $25. It's like a kit. Like, that's something else that I've seen people start to buy. And like going to the bathroom when you're homeless is probably the hardest thing to figure out, especially if you're in an inner city where it's customer only, or if you're known in that community, and the business owners are particularly, like, we all know the one homeless guy. He walks into like a business and they immediately tell him to get out. Like, that's, if you just got to go to the bathroom, something as simple as that be infinitely harder than you'll ever realize. And you'll think like, oh, well, I can just go in an alleyway or something. It's like, that's not how it works. And if you do that, you're probably just going to get arrested.
Mhm.
So, so I did want to talk on what exactly happened with you guys at the bus station, if you don't mind.
I pissed off at the commissioner's morals, and we got arrested.
Okay, so what was like the whole backstory about that? Because that's the one thing you can't do to the police is point out how they're being scumbags in that moment.
Exactly.
The light switch is on, and there.
So we had gone to our local bus terminal, main terminal. We had an outreach in the park earlier that day, and we were tracking.
If you could square up a little bit more to your microphone, because it's still doing the thing.
Sorry.
Yeah. You're fine.
So we had actually gone back to the CATA station trying to track down a homeless gentleman that had told us earlier in the day he needed underwear. So we had gone and gotten new underwear and tracked him down to the bus station. Well, then he asked if we had bus tokens, so I went and I got some bus tokens. Coming back, we decided to just hang out for a minute as a city cop was talking to one of the security guards. And they were talking about kicking out a group of like 3 or 4 homeless people that we saw walk in there. They had walked in there right before us. And they were talking about kicking them out. And they weren't questioning us, who were also standing there, but these 4 minorities, who I'm sure they knew were homeless. And so I questioned them about why they had to leave. I think the temperature at the time was I think
It,
digits. The wind chill was down below
Maybe
0.
you're still having trouble with your microphone. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
I have to fix this.
But the temperature was really, like single digits outside. Wind chill was down below 0. It was cold. It wasn't safe for people to be outside. The bus terminal is perfect.
it was during the polar vortex, if you guys remember that a couple years ago.
And
when it was super, super cold. Yeah.
Yeah, so I started to question them about why the homeless people had to leave, and of course that turned into a discussion of morals. And as one could imagine, having such a discussion with a cop is probably going to lead to something bad.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming you guys got arrested, and
Indeed.
it appears, at least from the article I'm reading here, that you didn't get charged with anything. But that's just kind of insane that
I was guilty of resisting arrest, which is like a rubber stamp of
Yeah. I'm wondering if anyone in 2020 even gets arrested by the police anymore without having a resisting arrest charge, no matter what happens.
They tried to initially charge us with trespassing because they asked if we were there to catch a bus, and we said no. And they said, well, if you're not there to get on a bus, you're considered loitering and trespassing. Now, mind you, we had just paid for bus tokens that we were distributing to people there. And so that was kind of our loophole out, was that that our lawyer used to defend us on with the trespassing charges, was that we were paying customers of the CATA station. We had bought bus tokens, and therefore we were customers and we were not trespassing.
So as a non-Lansing person, is CATA fully private? Is it a mixed, or is it like public Lansing transportation?
They are an agency, or they are publicly funded.
Okay, so it's like a private company that receives public funds, essentially.
They are a private company that receives public funding.
Yeah, so that there, like, whenever there's an instance like that, I truly believe in my heart is hearts, even as like a libertarian dude that's all like property rights and everything, like you're receiving, like you're a paying customer even if you don't pay, because your taxes are paying for that building. Period.
And that's what I was alluding to with the officers I was talking about. I was like, look, we pay for this, like all of us, like even them, they pay for this.
It seems okay. I figured out what's going on with your microphone. It seems to be a proximity thing. Like whenever your mouth is pointed away from the camera, it goes off, and then whenever you point at, I can hear you. Okay, so we figured out.
All right.
Much
So
better.
sorry.
No, you're fine. It's normally good, but like every other word, it would be like. But yeah. So yeah, you paid for it. You are a paying customer, whether you buy it or not. So like, yeah, maybe there would be a little bit of like the keep it clean, for lack of a better term, mentality. But at the end of the day, like, there's a polar vortex going on. People are cold. I'm assuming it wasn't very particularly busy in that bus station, because it doesn't look like in the video that was. So like, why? Like, why throw people out? Why bother people? Why make a scene? And just like, I'm a big thing about like waste of energy. Like efficiency is very important to me. So like, how is it efficient to have this officer like arrest you guys and kick these homeless people out for what is the positive gain? What is, the transfer of energy? What are we getting out of this?
Well, and then I think, what was it, like 2 days later, they turned the CATA station into a warming station.
24-hour warming station.
Because there was such a public outcry of people who saw that we got arrested and what for, that people were pissed, and they were contacting the mayor, contacting CATA, contacting the news, and they said, somebody needs to do something about this. And Canada was like, okay, well, we're going to open up during the time period of the polar vortex. We're going to open up 24/7 so that people can, if they need a place to stay, then.
Because that's how the CTA in Chicago did it. They're technically like the same sort of thing, like half public, half private, but you can go into the bus station at any point, and as long as you pay fare to get in, then they have warming stations, and you can just sit there forever. So you can literally buy just like one train ticket, which is like 50 cents or something like that, and then you could just hang out there for days if you wanted to. Like they have heat lamps and everything like that, and there's people that go through the CTA line. So it's like, yeah, something that simple just can help people. So I get really frustrated because that's not the only your experience is far from the only experience I've heard, particularly with like Rosa Parks downtown in Detroit, of people trying to use those for even temporary shelter. I myself got harassed for hanging out inside that building for an hour waiting for a ride. And like white dude, reasonably well dressed, had a suitcase, like not bothering anybody. And so like if they did that to me, I could only imagine like how like a minority like homeless person is getting treated in there. Because I was just standing outside the door trying to stay out of the rain. Like, sir, you can't be in here unless you're paying for a ticket. And it's like,
and from what we overheard by the group of people that were, at risk of being kicked out, we stood there and listened to their conversation for a little bit. And mind you, like Martin said, that they had just gotten to the station right at the same time that we got there. So they weren't there any longer than we were there, really. And they were talking about what their destination was going to be. There's a
which was a shelter.
There's a shelter that had literally just opened up a couple days before, but at that time the shelter now is open 24/7. But at that time they weren't open 24/7. They didn't open until I believe it was like 6 p.m. when they would open doors. And at this time it was maybe around about an hour or so before they opened. And the shelter is maybe like a 10-minute bus ride away from where they were. So they were debating, okay, well, do we want to get on the next bus, wait outside for almost an hour for them to open? Do we want to sit here inside here until we can catch a bus that's more convenient to the time that we need to be there when they open? Do we want to get outside and walk to the shelter?
So they didn't even know, the police didn't even know that they were going to be paying customers.
They were talking about getting on a bus. They were just debating like which bus are we going to get on, And one of these men was an elderly man with a cane, and it was snow, nearly up to our knees. And like, if you're going to make this old man like walk with a cane in nearly knee deep snow.
People die in that too. Like that's a lot of the fatalities in Austin is like an old guy like goes out to check his mail or something, falls down in the snow, and then just that's it. So like the fact that doing that to an elderly person in general and just the snap judgment of it, I don't understand. And the whole there's so many instances like that. We could probably talk for hours of just the like allergic reaction to homeless people actually makes the situation worse when there's so many instances where they're actually trying to help themselves out, try to get themselves out of a situation, or trying to even get themselves out of your area. And by calling the police on them, or by the police engaging with them, or by like denying service or something, you're actually guaranteeing the problem exists longer. It's like very counterproductive of if you're like some like suburbanite and you're like, oh, I don't want this in my neighborhood. It's like, well, your behavior and your actions are actually making sure that it's going to stay in your neighborhood for probably ever, because you're actually inhibiting these people getting help and inhibiting these people trying to take actions to improve their life.
Well, I think, what was it last year where the mayor was like, oh, we don't have a homeless population or a homeless problem. And we're like, what are you talking about? Like,
my
yes,
population 300 village I grew up in had a homeless person in it. Every community has a homeless problem in that.
Like, last year they said they solved I think they didn't have homeless vets because they had so many vets, utilizing the shelters at that time that the mayor deemed that we had solve the homeless vet problem. And I'm like, I see homeless vets all the time.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just having a shelter isn't solving the problem. That is the band-aid like to the solution. Because shelters are often temporary. There's a lot of weird things that go on in the shelters. Some of them are like particularly dangerous or have a lot of like kind of shady backroom dealings. There's a lot of abuse that happens in them. So like that's shelters are great. That's good. But like to just say like, oh, we got everyone in a shelter, the problem solved. No.
They
Well, and
aren't homes.
then there's an issue also if you're transgender.
Mhm.
You can't always go to a shelter.
Yeah, because a lot of them are gender specific.
Yep.
That had an issue. There was one right next to me that was like the men's like something church of man shelter or whatever on Second in MLK, and
Mm.
literally like there was like a woman just trying to get out of the rain, and she's like, "Can I just stand in here for like a little while until my ride comes?" And they're like, "No, this is an all male place." And it's like it's just computers, like people acting like computers. Like there's no empathy to like just moment to moment suffering of like
Mhm.
if I was running that door, I wouldn't care if there was like women are not legally allowed to walk through this door by law. I would be like, come on, like like
And we had I
frustrating.
was told this happened a while back, but no, well, within the last year or so, there was a there's a drop-in center here that supposedly is open and available to everybody. But there was a transgender person who came and was staying there and felt so unwelcome and not at ease that they ended up leaving and sleeping on the streets at night because the other people who were also staying there were harassing them so much. And when they approached the employees of the shelter, asked for help, or the they I was told that no, this is a faith-based shelter. I was told that the employee gave them a Bible and told them to go in the corner and read the Bible and just and think about it. And that was the employee's solution to
That's
their problem.
that's
And
totally
just
helpful.
basically continue to allow them to get harassed until the point that they decide to leave because they felt unsafe.
Yeah, that's what like when you talk about like the trans, for the lack of a better term, movement, like one of the things they talk about so much is how awful it is to be non-binary in any particular way from either direction and be homeless. Like that is a whole new frontier of issues and problems that don't get talked about, don't get addressed. And like you said, a lot of the shelters are faith-based organizations, which is like, okay, fine. But that brings up of like, as we were talking about before, oh, we solved the homelessness problem. Well, if you have like, I know in Lansing, there are people that do have issues with housing that identify in some non-binary fashion, saying like, oh, well, we have all these shelters. Why won't they go to them? It's like, well, the same reason why I probably wouldn't stay in a church because like there's a degree of yeah, it's not safe. Like there, a lot of people don't understand about shelters that sometimes it's actually more safe to sleep on a bench than be in a shelter, particularly if you are of a group that area has a problem with, whether that be like a Hispanic person in Texas, whether that be, if you're like the one person of color in a community and happen to be homeless, like you're probably going to have a really bad time at the shelter if there's a lot of racist people around. So there's just those levels of issues that don't get talked about in kind of the suburban, like middle class, helicopter help people don't understand the situation on the ground.
Well, and I think that's a good thing about like with Punks with Lunch. I mean, we have people there from across the political board, across the religious board, but we're not there for that. We're there to help the at-risk or the homeless. We're not there to talk politics or push our religion on anybody like that. Like, we don't care. We don't want to hear it. Like, just
I'm trying next week to go out with a dude called Unholy Rome. He's a Detroit based, like super, he literally calls himself like the black communist. And I'm going out with him to help out homeless people because we're not here to debate economics. We're here to help people. So like that's another thing is I've talked to a lot of people on the right that are like, oh, I would love to, just for example, I would love to go help out punks with lunch, but I think it would be really weird being like the one Trump supporter or something there. You'd be like, no, just fuck that. Just show up.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to care.
I mean, you don't wear
These
your
are not
mask,
political.
but
Yeah, these are
don't-
not
Yeah, don't
political issues. These are not
if you
political
don't bring it,
issues.
it's not going to get talked about.
Yeah, don't
exactly.
Period.
Yeah.
And that goes to the same of like, there are some faith-based organizations that I've had to talk friends of, like, I understand why you'd be hesitant to like work with these people, but like, I've worked with them. They're not going to talk about it. They're not going to bring it up and I'm happy you're here. So definitely like hesitations about that. Try to overcome it because this isn't, it shouldn't be political. There's nothing political about it. Like,
It might have political causes or sources, and there may be political differences, but these are human beings that don't have homes, that are trying to survive in this world. We can work together to help. And the thing is, the institution and powers that be or not. So like, I guess we're probably about the timetable that we need to talk about, like what we can do. So what you can do as an individual, find something near you, whether it be punks with lunch, whether it's starting a punks with lunch, or even if it was starting a Trumpers with lunch. I think that would be pretty off color. But the thing is, do something. Anybody can do something, and don't trust the government to fix it, or the state to do it, or the cities to do it. They are not adequately handling the problems. Like, we as individuals need to take it upon ourselves to help take care of our communities. And a lot of us don't have a lot. A lot of us are stressed. A lot of us are, thing is, we have more than the people who are being completely chewed up by the current situation. And we can all take a little bit of time, or find someone doing something that you appreciate. If you have some money, and donate it, or, be involved. But, be aware of what's going on in your area with the community, and see if there's something you can do.
Most definitely. And I mean, I don't know. I always have worked in the community, and I feel that's where you're going to get the most change, is by helping your community. That's where you're going to see the change that you want to be.
You guys know me. I always preach the 50-mile bubble. Like, no one outside of your 50-mile bubble is going to come save you. You need to help your 50-mile bubble. And if you have that mentality and more people did that, then there would be less strain on these national programs. There'd be less issues with them. They would work more effectively if you had it to where it was more localized and each problem was addressed by the community and solved from within the community, and pushing for that more. And I think people are waking up to that, just from how many fucking spectacular government failures that have happened over this last year, whether it be environmental stuff or causes around the homeless, and getting around to it. And hopefully we see that grow more. And like you said, things you can do. You brought up that great point, Martin, and I'm going to echo that. Go to your local pizza place. Maybe not a chain store, because corporations are corporations, but just go to your local like family-owned pizza place and just say, hey, like at 9:00 on Saturday, is it okay if I come and get a couple pizzas and go give it to some homeless people? And there's more often than not, especially with like the family-owned stuff, if you are approachable and you're warm and friendly about it, and you know exactly what you're doing, they're gonna be perfectly cool with it and just snowball from there.
Well, and I think one thing that needs to be brought up is actually talk to the people that you're helping to see what they need. Maybe they don't like pizza, or like one of the things that we found out. What?
Or they have an allergy.
It happens.
Yeah. And one of the things that we found out working early with them is a lot of them don't have very good dental hygiene. So like apples and hard granola bars, they can't eat, so and like at the back 40, their thing is they can't keep anything dry. Okay, we brought out tote bins. You can put your stuff in the tote bin, it stays dry, it stays clean.
I'm assuming you guys have some form of, whether it be a mailing list or a social media or whatever, that you like update of like what you're asking for, or like at least talk to people in some kind of way, right?
Yeah, and
Instagram.
Okay, yeah. Because that's the big thing is I know personally, just talking to a couple of people, they're like, I never know what to bring, and they are at least aware enough to know not just to bring whatever the hell they have down, because it might cause a, like we've talked about before, littering problem or something like that in terms of too many clothes or whatever. So like, I guess that'd be the other thing, is if you're doing this locally, kind of try to keep updated of like, hey, bring this, do not bring this. because a lot of people just don't even know what to bring or what is wanted. I know a lot of food banks have a lot of issues because people either bring stuff that they can't take, or people will show up at the food bank that I volunteered in Chicago and be like, "Oh, you guys accept this? I could have brought this. I have so much of it at home. I had no idea you guys accepted it." And it's like, well, yeah, we
Green beans.
yeah, like we had a whole
Everybody has green beans.
yeah, it's like we had a whole Facebook post, like follow the Facebook. We'll tell you what to bring. So definitely like try to, if you're the person bringing stuff, try to figure out what's actually needed and wanted, whether it be by the individual or the organization you're working with. And if you're the organization, try to keep people updated of like, hey, for the love of God, stop bringing winter jackets. We have like 30 of these. We can't even use them anymore. Bring this instead, you know?
Well, what was it? Last year or the year before when we ended up with all those dry beans?
Oh,
Like just
geez.
bags and bags and bags of dried beans.
I eat those like
And
chips.
Houseless people can't even cook those. That's the thing.
right.
Exactly.
And you know that
That
was another thing.
Them in the river for a few days.
What's that?
You could put them in nylons and put them in the river for a few days to get the moisture like soaked into them.
Well, we ended up taking the dried beans and making soup and making chili and just giving out bowls of soup.
That's the thing. That we can do. I mean,
Yeah.
screw the health department, but yeah.
Exactly. Screw the health department. Okay, so we've hit an hour, so I don't know if there's any other things y'all want to cover really quick before we go. Anything?
Did you want to cover what happened in Florida?
Oh, see, that's a whole big rabbit hole that I feel like could go on another hour.
Maybe
I want to.
Maybe that's next week.
Yeah, because I want to talk about that. If people don't know, not only did one of our guys get grabbed for spicy tweets on the internet, but a BLM anti-fascist activist was grabbed in Florida because the police considered his accelerationist Twitter post to be a threat to the community. So they literally just grabbed him. The FBI did.
I think next week is free speech.
Yeah, because there's a lot of instances where you have like more the Joe Biden Democrat people being like, oh yeah, the FBI is going after all these domestic terrorists, and then I start looking through the news and it's like, wow, there's sure a lot of left-wing activists getting grabbed for going after right-wing domestic terrorists. Like, what's actually going on here? So yeah, that's a whole fucking rabbit hole we'll go into next week. And
next week, free speech.
If people want to look them up, it's John Silveski in Louisville, Kentucky, and then Daniel Baker is the BLM activist that got grabbed in Florida. If you want more on that story, we'll cover that tomorrow. And I'm trying to get a protest together for Daniel Baker because nobody seems to really be talking about it, of like one of their own community organizers literally getting his door kicked in and grabbed by the FBI for spicy Twitter posts. So nightmare dystopia we live in nowadays. Oh God. Okay. And I guess you guys, do you have anything you want to say? Anything upcoming with Pucks with Lunch? Any kind of like social media you want to put out? Anything like that before we go?
Well, I wanted to mention, you mentioned organizations and motivating people.
Tilt your laptop again so you're not cutting out.
So you had mentioned, what people can do to help. And like, I think the biggest, toughest thing for people is taking the first step in helping. But talking about it is a great thing. You get out there and you talk to different people. You pitch your ideas around. You pitch them to the guy at the pizza shop. You talk to different people, and that's what can get that first step going for you and finding out how you can best help. It doesn't necessarily take a group like Punks to be there, but we are there. We're available, Punks with Lunch Lansing on Facebook. Twitter is, or I'm sorry. Instagram Punks with Lunch Lansing.
I'll put that all in the post when like the full video goes up for everybody. So
very cool.
Yeah, and there's also how many other branches now? There's North Carolina, Las Vegas,
Oakland,
Sacramento, Chicago, Philadelphia, West Oakland.
So there's several, half a dozen at least.
Is there like a main page somewhere somebody can follow, like, or is it totally?
There's not a main page that connects us.
We're all independent.
I prefer that, but I had to ask. That's more my style, so I like that. But I just figured if there was one. All right, cool. Well,
so I could just start a Punks with Lunch here.
Fuck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to some people about doing that. Why not? I can inspire some people to
Oh,
take on that
yeah.
project. I'm good at
Are you a
delegating
punk?
things.
Are you a punk?
I'm a goth, but I'm old school.
You don't
Okay.
have to.
Yeah.
And I mean,
I'm a
the-
dude. I you know,
I mean, I grew up, but like I'm an anarchist midwife. I mean, like being
Good
an out of
enough.
hospital midwife is like I'm absolutely I'm so punk rock.
Right.
Anarchist for over 20 years, I think. Yeah.
oh yeah, and yeah, I just love the logo of it. Just a paper bag with the anarchy. Like it's
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it's so.
Yeah,
mint.
we came across that on the internet, so we stole it. They contacted us like months later. They're like, "Hey, you're using our logo." We're like, "Yeah." They're like, "That fucking rocks." Cool.
Hell yeah!
Right.
I love it. Perfect. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's everything. I really appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll definitely keep being in touch because that's kind of what I'm focused on in the near future is kind of getting more people involved in this because there's so many people that are like, I love what you're talking about. How do I help? And then I was like, oh, I didn't plan for this. I need like let me go talk to some people, and then I'll point you to the people that you can actually like get involved with. So we'll definitely be in touch, and yeah. I don't really have anything else to say. Appreciate the couple people that were here watching. This will be live in a little bit, and we will be back 8 p.m. next week with the free speech talk. Probably get I'm going to try to get somebody from Florida on that knows Daniel Baker personally, and then maybe a UPG guy, and then both kind of talk about how both those stories are bullshit. We'll see how that goes. But thank you, everybody. You all have a wonderful rest of your night.
Peace out, guys.